Hey everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Buddy Study Group. And today we're gonna bring a bit of a positive light to probably our most difficult discussion as long-term care specialists, and that's gonna be a discussion around declines. It's a nasty word. It's something we don't like to hear, whether it's agents or clients, but it is inevitably a part of the process until we get to a market that is fully guaranteed issue. I don't think we'll ever get there. So, knowing that, we have to be able to navigate this conversation with a bit of grace. And we also need to know that we can't just leave this conversation at hope we don't get declined and then we get declined and pick up the pieces from there. I think a lot of the discussion around declines is made better by your preparation, right? And I think for many that goes without saying. But I do kind of want to take you through just kind of the mental process for declines, give us all some refreshers and reminders, but also bring a bit of perspective to it and give an idea of what items of preparation, both conversation based and just clerical work based, will help you make those conversations a bit better before they even really have to be undergone. So, I'm going to go through kind of my perspective, but this is a session where I'd really love to hear from you guys. I don't think there's anybody who has not dealt with a decline. You know, a lot of the times we learn lessons and we move forward, right? And there's a lot to be pulled from each and every case where there is or may have been a decline. So I would love to hear from you on your approaches, but to start off the conversation, Linda said this on her field underwriting study group a little while back, and it's something she said a couple of times, and I've really kind of taken it to heart. She likens a lot of this process to say yes to the dress. Now, I don't know if you've seen the show, doesn't matter if you've seen the show, but essentially what they talk about a lot is budget, right? They go through the budget that the bride to be has for a wedding dress, and you never want to show somebody something without getting an idea of their budget first, and the golden rule kind of being never going over that budget, because if you show somebody something that they fall in love with and it turns out that they can't access it, out of their financial budget in this case, it's going to be a tough sell from then on because everything else sort of feels like settling, and you're always going to have that one dress you kind of fell in love with in the back of your mind. Well, I think this is a conversation about financial budget in relation to the show, but there's also a health budget that we're dealing with when we're working with folks, right? We can have as much wealth as anyone, and we can have a really low health budget. Our health really can't purchase us many plans. So I think it is super important to keep that in mind and make that a part of the conversation right up front is get into the health and wealth discussion, of course. Some people may have great health and be limited on the financial side, but oftentimes you'll get many interested clients who really want long-term care, and you wonder, wow, what's got them so jazzed up about long-term care? It could be that their health is limiting their options and they need to get something before they don't have any, right? And that conversation as a whole, I think, has gotten less severe over the years because we do have a lot more products for people with substandard health. And in the case now with Equitrust Bridge, we have guaranteed issue options available. So oftentimes the decline conversation has gotten better for us because we're less likely to be in a scenario where we're saying to a client, sorry, I don't have anything for you based on health, right? Um, but we still have to manage this conversation. One of the reasons this conversation is so important is because declines are actually an underwriting parameter for many carriers. So there's a number of carriers, and feel free to drop in the chat the ones that you know for sure. But there are many carriers now that will not accept clients who have previously been declined. So the stakes for getting this right and doing our field underwriting correctly and making sure that the client is well informed right up front about the process with health underwriting, stakes are higher than ever, right? Because we can shut down a whole lot of options for somebody by just kind of slamming business through and hoping we don't get declined. Um, so we have a couple things in the chat. Just want to read those before we keep going on. I start with need, longevity, and then budget before I prepare a proposal. I mean, that is, um, you know, it's huge. Those are kind of three main pillars that I would consider um, amongst an ocean of things that we can and probably should ask in fact finding. But that is a definite for me. I agree. The new Care Matters annuity is going to help a lot. Not asking about previous declines is great. Limited amount of health questions is great. That means they're kind of targeting a higher acceptance rate, lower decline rate than many other products. And we'll have Julie Udovich on next week to actually talk us through the Care Matters annuity so we can do a deeper dive on the underwriting there. But I think you kind of hit the nail on the head just talking about the Care Matters annuity, but just having a lot of alternative products in your back pocket. I kind of just call, I use that term to talk about products that are kind of old reliable to have in your back pocket in case someone is declined or is pre-qualified and told not to apply for, their favorite option or, option B, C, or D, right? Really good fallback solutions is one of the ways that you really help with this process. We'll get into that a little bit more in a minute, but I want to talk about the psychology because saving cases is more than just doing good prep work, though that's essential, right? But we need to understand where a client is psychologically when they get a decline and how to help them get over that process. Because you could be prepared and you could have all sorts of backup options available for the client. But again, if they have their heart set on something and they can't get it, that's going to cause an emotional reaction. But I also just think being declined in general is an emotional reaction is going to be evoked from that. A lot of clients take it personally, and can you blame them? It's a basic human principle that we have problems with rejection, right? We don't want to be rejected. Salespeople have a really good time of dealing with rejection, but for most of the populace, I would say being rejected is a very hurtful sort of feeling. So we want the client to, number one, understand that being declined may be part of the process, but we also want to make them feel better about that concept if they happen to be declined. So I think language that has really helped me throughout my time working in long-term care is you can blame the carrier a little bit, and I'll kind of give you an idea of how I do that. And I don't think they mind necessarily. So what I try to draw a dichotomy between is getting a clean bill of health from your doctor and acceptance or a clean bill of health from a profit-seeking insurance company. Those are two completely different things. And it's important, I think, that you make that clear to the client better beforehand than at time of decline. But I think, again, in both senses, it's good to bring that up. Your doctor can give you a clean bill of health and you can be a healthy individual, right? Like there is no immediate risk or threat to your life or quality of life, right? And that's an amazing thing. That should be our first priority is, being at that level of health. But a profit-seeking insurance company is constantly doing calculations. There's nerds just like me behind desks at the insurance carrier, and they're doing calculations of this person is going to give me this much money, and I have to weigh the probability of something happening down the line and how much will I be paying them out in claims dollars? How likely am I to be paying out claims dollars for this person for their condition, right? So just from that comparison, you can see that an insurance company has to be infinitely more conservative with how they judge someone's health, right? Because you may get that response if somebody's declined. Well, I went to my doctor 6 months ago and they told me everything was fine. I was good, right? But there is something in the records, in the interview, in what they have heard, um, in their information gathering process and underwriting that they don't want to offer you a binding contract for this product. It does not mean you're unhealthy, right? We can bring a little bit of logic to it. But at the end of the day, we're also dealing with an emotional response, right? So we got to level with them. Yeah, this isn't a good feeling, right? You can logic me all you want, but I'm still pissed off that this company doesn't want me. And that can have repercussions beyond just the one client who's declined. If we're dealing with a couple, right? And maybe we're not even doing a joint product, but maybe we're doing two individual policies with the same carrier. Sometimes the other spouse will say, well, if they don't want my husband, then they're not going to get me, right? I'm sure many of you have run into that as well. And so we need to have the ability to consult people through this emotional time. We got to help bring some logic to the process, but we also have to tie things back into the emotion, right? I hope that many of you, when you're having your first calls with people about long-term care, you are asking, why are you interested in long-term care? And what is your concern about an extended care event happening to you or to your spouse? Because the answer to that question, it's a super important question to ask because the answer to that question is how you're going to tie things back in a number of ways. If they ghost you, drop off the face of the earth, this is something you can use. Hey, remember the answer you gave me? Remember you told me you wanted to do this so that you weren't a burden on your children, or that as spouses, you aren't a burden on each other if you need extended care. So you can have professional care, you can have that access, you can fund that. We haven't solved that yet. We haven't put those puzzle pieces together yet. So when you're ready, let's get back and finish this process because I know when we talked, this was important to you. Same thing about a decline. If you have somebody who is going rogue because their spouse has been declined, well, if this is still important to you, if long-term care planning is still important to you, we still need to get a piece in place for both of you. And I can totally understand if you're offended, by the carrier declining your spouse, but I would consider still taking this plan and we can find something for your spouse, or we can find something for both of you potentially at a different carrier, right? Um, so I think understanding why long-term care is important to them, understanding that they're a little bit emotionally hurt because they've been declined, uh, it's a difficult hill to climb, but you gotta tie it back to the emotional response that they gave or the emotional answer that they gave when you ask them why long-term care planning is important to them, right? So I think that is really, really key to saving cases. It's a small thing, it's a soft thing, but it really, really is important, and I think it has a lot of impact. Um, yeah, and Chris, you kind of nailed it. I'm talking about situations here where we have somebody who's declined and kind of how do we move forward there. But the conversation we have before is probably the most important piece to this. You're going to have less of an emotional response, I think, if you have this conversation up front. And again, you talk about that dichotomy between who's given you a clean bill of health here, and you talk about the fact that, um, you know, I'm going to pre-qualify you with these carriers, right, to get an idea ahead of time. So we're not scrambling after dealing with a decline, right? I think if you keep them up to speed in the pre-qualification process and you really give them a decent detail of what the carrier thinks, because there's a range of outcomes you can get when you pre-qualify a client, right? You can get absolutely send this right in, or you can get don't send this in. You can also get a bunch of gray area in the middle, right? Um, I would always respond to an underwriter's request for more information because the more information you give, the more accurate answer you're going to get, but you're going to get a lot of gray area answers, provided that the client hasn't had XYZ nuance with their specific condition that they're dealing with, we may be able to consider, right? Not all answers are going to be go ahead and submit, no problem, or no way, don't even submit an application. There's going to be a lot of fence sitting. And so as long as you kind of help the client understand this, hey, I've pre-qualified with some carriers. I know our top carrier choice was carrier A. I talked with their underwriting team. I sent them the, pre-qualification health information, and they let me know that we can submit an application, but there is kind of an individual consideration scenario at play, right? They're going to take a look at everything they can get in the medical records and will make a decision from there. They're not going to give you a percentage chance necessarily of being approved or declined in most cases, but you can tell them, hey, it's not a guarantee, right? It's not I wasn't given an answer that this is a sure thing, right? So we can go down the list and keep looking at other carriers and try applying with who is a sure thing first, or we can try to apply for that option A. And as you're doing a lot of pre-qualifications and field underwriting and you start submitting a lot of cases and getting experience with the ranges of outcomes, you can sort of give the client an idea of how likely you think it is. Right. So I think that preparation, doing good pre-qualification, good field underwriting leads into this as well, right? Because if you're not capturing enough information and the underwriter is giving you, a pre-qualification response based on incomplete information, then when the full medical records come in, there's going to be new information that's going to, change the outcome of the case compared to what they said when they pre-qualified you, right? So I think it's so important to set that up. It's not just wealth that buys us the plan, it's health. I'm going to need to collect some health information because I need to understand what carriers are a good fit from a health standpoint. I need to check with underwriters ahead of time to see if they will consider, because this makes the process a bit more predictable. It makes it a bit smoother, and it gives us an idea of which carriers we can try to work with and see which carriers might accept us. That is not an offer of coverage when they say go ahead and submit an application. They're going to take a look at your medical records. They're going to ask you a number of health questions on the application. They're going to interview you, and the results of all of that really determine whether or not the carrier will accept us for coverage, right? So having that kind of full conversation and letting them know the full process, we may be declined, right? That's going to help the kind of severity of reaction you get in case there is a decline. And if you think there's even a chance that there's going to be a decline, um, like Jeff said in the chat, you got to make sure that you've got some backup carriers that will not, um, that will consider clients that have been previously declined, right? And let them kind of know your roadmap. Okay, I know this is kind of your favorite option. This is what we're going to go forward with, but I also know, it's not a 100% chance that they're going to approve us for coverage. So we need to have some, alternate routes to be able to go in case that happens. Because even if we're declined, long-term care planning of any sort is still important to us, and we want to have some really good alternatives to back us up. So um, that is kind of how I imagine laying out this process. You got to meet the client where they're at, and you got to give them all the information to avoid bad surprises at the end of the day. But I want to hear from you all if you have any perspective. How are you all dealing with declines? How are you all doing upfront work to mitigate that possibility of declines? I just want to hear from your experience, or if you have case studies, feel free to share that too.
Jason, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I got you, Jeff. What's up?
Awesome. This is such a great topic and an important one because I just had this.
Hmm.
Literally had a husband and wife apply. She had been declined 14 years ago, and we get her approved at Bright House. Happy as a camper, right?
Right.
Husband's declined. Husband's ticked off, mad, basically takes it all the way to, we're not gonna, since I can't get approved, we're not gonna even take hers. And they're
Right.
going, oh, to add more stress to it, he's one of the number one Medicare agents in the country, and he's a partner of mine on referrals for each other. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I want to keep getting referrals and working with him. We've got to figure this out. What do I do? What do I do? But you made a great point. Go back to why we had this discussion in the first place, why he wanted to partner with me in the first place. So there was a lot of back and forth. And this is something that I don't know if you mentioned earlier. He did not disclose something, and that's what got him
Yep.
declined. It was a DUI from 11 years ago.
Mm.
And he's like, they declined me, I know, because of alcohol. I said, I don't know how they could have when we are full disclosure, gave him your counseling notes, and they said, go ahead and apply after, since you've been dry for over a year. And they said, we'll take them. Let's go. And I said, oh, dude, if that's the reason, ah, now I understand.
Right.
So then I have a breakfast with Nationwide who tells me, hey, we're about to launch something. I'm like, that'll help my guy. He'll qualify for that. So I presented that to him. I said, this is coming your way. We'll get you approved. But I want to ask you a question. Your wife, we have 14 days to accept the offer. It's a 60-day offer, 14 days left. Clock is ticking. I said, I want to ask you one question. As your advisor, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you this question to lay out. Look at what she's approved for. If you want to cross this bridge later, we can certainly do that. But now we're taking into account prices can go up. Most importantly, her health can change. She was declined 14 years ago for a reason.
Yeah.
Something else could come up, and we're getting her 9x her money by the time she's 80 on indemnity. Life is good. So the final question I said, listen, if this was a good idea for her to have this coverage when we started the process, why isn't it still a good idea today?
Yeah, I love that.
And he said, I'll send the 71 grand and we'll fund the thing tomorrow.
Right. Yeah,
Sometimes
I
you just
think
got to be upfront and direct.
you're right. People vacate their logic when they get caught up in emotion. Emotion that's caused by rejection is super powerful. And
Yeah.
sometimes you need to just give that one unlock that is needed to say, "Oh, yeah, I'm I'm probably not being logical here, and I can decide at this moment whether I want to continue to vacate logic or I want to just kind of continue to play this ball game and be upset." Right? And your case study is a good one because if 14 years ago she wasn't able to get coverage, that is a long time to go feeling like you may never be able to access the coverage, right? And there's
Yeah.
a lot to unpack there, right? I mean, you may feel that it's a one and done, that I hit the end of the road, that's it. But this market is constantly evolving, and carriers are pulling all sorts of different levers with their product to make sure that they can incorporate wider ranges of health history. So for many, this could be the nationwide annuity. You mentioned it. That could be a good outlet for folks. Equitrust Bridge is not new, but it's newer. If you haven't spoken to folks who have that kind of financial ability to make a single premium, but have not been able to purchase coverage based on their health, it's time to get back in touch with that person. Short-term care options keep springing up. If you are in a state that has short-term care coverage with this client, it's time to have that conversation if you haven't, because you don't want folks feeling like they're on an island. That is the worst place to leave a conversation is, sorry, there's just no options that I have available. And not just for the emotional state it leaves the client in and how it gets them thinking about extended care coverage going forward, but also if somebody else comes along and tells them, well, why didn't your guy tell you about this product? I think you would actually qualify for this. Then you've just lost business and the emotion is actually flipped to you, right? So, yeah, great case study. There's so much to unpack there, but yeah, given a 14-year gap, especially, how did it feel to spend 14 years thinking that you might not be able to access this and have it, and then it's something that you're now kind of looking to take away because somebody was rejected, right? Um,
Yeah.
so that's what I think blame the carrier a little bit in those case studies. Carriers know that they have underwriting standards. It's not as if they're going to take it as slander. You just have to be logical and say, look, these people they are trying to make money on the fact that you have good enough health that you'll pay them around the same in premium as they'll pay you out in claims, hopefully less, right? That is kind of like the broth of the soup in their decision making. Your doctor doesn't have a hand in any sort of practices like that, right? So they can assess you from a human perspective of am I in good health, right? Am I at risk today of something, or am I at risk in the near term of something? The insurance
Yeah.
company is, of course, it's more humanizing than this, but when they're making these calculations, you are a cell on a spreadsheet and a gigantic risk formula from your health history. And that's unfortunately the way they have to do this if we're going to be able to, as an industry, offer folks meaningful coverage. So it's hard not to take it personal. I would take it personal if I were you, but just remember why we started doing this thing.
And Jason, by the way, I had pre-shopped him everywhere and he was pre-decline everywhere. But
Hmm.
Bright House said, yeah, we will absolutely take a look. So when we got the rejection, of course he was pissed. And my response first to him was, I'm pissed too. I can't believe
Right.
this. I said, here's the deal. I am going to go fight for you because I know all these companies. I've been selling their stuff forever. I'm going to go fight for you, but I need to clarify what am I missing? What part of the story am I missing? And that's when it came out. And I was like, oh, he said, so don't fight for me on that. But I think part of it is letting your client know you're willing to go fight for them and you'll battle with them on their behalf.
Yeah, and I think that's something to let referral partners know too, because I think being good at exactly this part of the process, field underwriting, um, understanding, declines, being able to help save cases, or just being knowledgeable enough to know the alternatives and backups in case of declines, you guys need to understand how valuable that is and how referable that is to exactly the type of people you want to be working with as long-term care specialists. Um, just put your wealth manager, financial advisor hat on you have all sorts of stuff to be watching and thinking about and talking to your clients about day in and day out as you manage their portfolios. You have to be in tune with not just so many of the inner workings of the securities world, but you also have to be like finger on the pulse of the news and understand how that moves markets and being ready to counsel clients through that. Do you think you want to go through all these battles? Do you think you even want to do the homework if you don't have to of knowing your client's full health history? Many people don't even want to bring the relationship to that point. That is why you're valuable. You are the person who is equipped to put those gloves on and get in there and get that information and put it to good use and find the right home for that health information, right? Because that's a person on the other end that you can help, and that advisor is a person that you can help with so many different clients. I guarantee you, I've worked with advisors for a lot of years as a long-term care specialist at my previous job, and I will tell you, 75% of advisors just want to quit after their first decline if they go through it and put their hands on it themselves. I would argue that the number may be higher. That's my estimation, but holy cow, I just did all of this. I just gathered all this information. I just did a 30-page application. There is nothing that I do in my world that is a 30-page application. I just talked back and forth with underwriters and case managers, and I had to play a game of telephone with my clients that I had never have before because the carrier came back with 10 questions. I had to relay them all to my client, get them relayed back to me, relay them back to the carrier. Like, think about how much time that is for somebody who's not an expert, and then for it all to end up in a decline and no commission and an angry client and a client who is depressed to some point that they probably don't feel like talking about other financial things that are pressing that I talk to them about for my own bottom line and for theirs, right? I don't want to do this anymore. This is only going to subtract from what I do, right? So understand that being good at this process makes you infinitely referable because this is my guy, Jeff, and Jeff gets the answers that are needed and does a lot of the really hard work to get you at a spot that's going to work for you financially and is going to fit your situation. But this business is not easy and it can't be taken on as a minor. We talk about that all the time. Being a long-term care specialist is a full-time job. You can't moonlight as a long-term care specialist without many years of knowledge already, right? You can't just kind of like pick it up. Like I've got my 6 and 63 and I've got my CFP and I've got a really successful practice. I've had so many years of not talking about long-term care, but I'm just going to kind of pick it up and become a specialist. I don't think that's very feasible, and this is the reason why. And you're going to find that it's a drain on all other elements of your practice. So I'm teaching you how to sell yourself to financial advisors because this is the stuff that scares the living daylights out of them. Really does. They don't have to do this in order to retain clients and maintain really good rapport with their clients. So why risk damaging it? Pass it off to me. I'm good at it. And, if anything adverse does happen, it won't be because I did bad homework. And they'll see it as a reflection of me, not you, right? The process that's burned into their head is working with me. And even if it's bad for a moment, we're still going to find them something that they can get access to at the end of the day. I think that's one of the easiest aspects to sell yourself on as a long-term care specialist if you're looking to work with more advisors, especially. Diane said, part of our responsibility is to know who will decline and why. So the person you're helping doesn't get talked into an automatic decline with a less experienced agent or advisors. Exactly. Exactly. We need to ask the tough questions early. They got to know why we're asking the tough questions. And if you do that, it will play out, as you've kind of designed it in your conversation with the client, right? Um, the more you just keep them updated on every little thing, right? Um, even you have to kind of really refine your language doing this a bunch to keep the client updated properly in a way that kind of keeps them in the game and doesn't discourage them, right? Like we're talking, we just um okay, diabetes not always an issue in a vacuum, right? But we need to make sure that in our most recent readings, our A1C doesn't spike above 7, right? Or we don't have any other cardiac conditions in combination with this, right? Or I'm going to pre-qualify this with as many carriers as I can. But if I had to say there is anything that would come back as a concern, it's this, right? So it's not a surprise as to what results in a decline or what results in a carrier coming back and saying, you know, sorry, please don't submit, right? But I would rather hear, please don't submit 100 times before hearing, sorry, you've been declined, because 10 other options just went flying off the shelf, and one of those options may have actually taken us, right? So it's got to be pre-qualification all the way. It's got to be like, do not be afraid of, um, you know, feeling like you're taking the client's time by asking them health questions. It's going to cost you more time on the back end if you don't. And, you know, Linda's pre-qualification form that we went over, it's huge. There is 3 pages of questions. But do you think there is much time wasted on the back end? Probably not, because Linda has almost all of the information she needs to do what she's got to do up front. And she can take in that information because she's a pro and she can say, look, XYZ may be a worry to some underwriters. We're going to see what they say. And we're going to have some options available, and we're going to have a real order of operations at which we can really look at this. And, with these options we have here, including your favorite, including a few of the backups, we can't miss. We're going to end up with quality long-term care coverage, regardless. 2 more leads on your calendar since that experience. I mean, that's exactly it. Part of surviving in this business is about being referable, right? And doing the right thing by a client. And even if circumstances outside of your control lead to a little sadness, lead to a little upset feelings, if you've done everything in your power to make sure that you mitigate that and that they understand it ahead of time, that look, insurance companies can be heartbreakers. Uh, it's not going to be the blame on you. It'll just be the blame on, well, that stinks, right? You will come out as somebody who's done everything possible to get them where they need to go. So they'll be more open to talking about option BCD, and they'll be more willing to refer you to folks, right? If you make them feel comforted during a tough time, a tough go of it, right? Just going through the process is tough. So making sure that they feel comfortable, even if it's a success all the way through, that makes you referable at the end of the day. Um, so love that case study, Jeff. I also think somebody from the Medicare realm being your client is a tough one because they're used to guaranteed issue underwriting and open enrollment periods, right? As long as we apply at this time, we don't have any questions to ask you except your name, date of birth, social security number, and a few other formalities, right? Your checking account information. It's an easy process. So in that sense, folks who work with Medicare or folks who work in health insurance, same deal. They're used to dealing with a bit easier process from an underwriting standpoint. So if they want to expand their business and keep their clients from going down the street, deal with somebody who's used to dealing with a tough underwriting process. Yeah, folks who work in transactional industries who are looking to expand in long-term care. Those are your people that will want to refer to you if they plan to do any work in long-term care. And I'll tell you, people in those industries, when somebody asks about it, they hit this little button in a drawer of their desk and alarm bells and sirens start going off and they're like, I need somebody right now because I need to furnish this ask, or something bad's going to happen. They're going to go to the other guy, right? Transactional folks are very worried about not being able to fulfill a need, right? Um, so yeah, I think you can do everything perfect and end up with a decline, but it's about doing everything to the best of your ability. That regardless of the result, that's going to reflect positively on you. It's going to reflect positively on your client's mental state. It's going to reflect positively on your referral partner's view of you, right? So, um, you can turn the bad into a good at the end of the day. Hey, Gretchen, I saw you went off mute. You have anything you want to ask or
No,
say?
yes. Actually, I am super curious. And Jason, maybe you asked this and I just missed it because I was multitasking. But I'm curious about others' experience with like a horrifying decline, or could have been a horrifying decline story, and how you turned that around. I know I see Romeo here and Diane, and is are there any other stories that that you would want to share? Don't be shy.
I've got a good one if nobody does.
I know you do. No? Going once,
Okay,
going. Oh,
I'll
Romeo.
volunteer.
Okay.
There used to be a product called a medically underwritten immediate annuity called Immediate Care when Golden Rule had it. Four companies had
Mm-hmm.
it. They all dropped it because they just didn't know what it was. But it basically was an annuity where if you're already in care, they underwrite how bad your health is. And then, if your life expectancy was only 13 months, they'll give you a hell of an annuity contract, a life income annuity based on that. But it's not being offered right now. But when it was, I remember going out to a house where the wife was declining, and the husband says, I'm going to take my policy. I said, no problem. That's all I need is a signature. And I wrote up a thing on my letterhead. I'm declining my policy. I need to have your signature. Sorry, I got to come over. And had him sign it first of all. He'd offered me coffee. I took it and had him sign that. And then I told him about the medically unwritten annuity. I said, so when your wife does need care, you've got $200,000 nest egg. We could use the whole thing to get her covered and leave you with nothing, but we can fix your wife's problem. Unfortunately, you won't have long-term care anymore. And he said, well, I I'll take the policy. I said, sir, you signed a letter saying you wanted to cancel it. I made him beg me to take his policy. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
if you want it, you got to tell me, right? Like you gotta prove it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Appreciate that.
Thanks,
Um,
Romeo.
I've got a story that like really helped me with my feeling of purpose in the long-term care industry, and this was, I mean, I'm sure many of you have sold the qualified dollars asset care before when it was Annuity Care 3. I felt like I had made it because I was working with a really high-powered CPA in Southern California area, and I was able to get them to kind of understand the value. Got through the tax questions, and she and her husband were ready to apply. And I thought that was just the coolest thing. If I can talk to a tax professional and get them to understand how this works, I feel like I could explain any product, right? So we get all the way through. Um, get the application submitted. I mean, for those of you who haven't written it, the application's like this thick if you're doing it on paper. Did it on paper, mailed the application, got all the signatures back. This is a heck of a lot of work. And we got it in, and the underwriter, as we are in the underwriting process, says the husband has to have a biopsy, another biopsy, before we'll consider him for coverage. And I went back and kind of communicated that to them. He was upset. I just had a biopsy 8 months ago, and you want me to go do another one? I'm not doing it. Like I'm not. I just do not want to do it. I don't want to go in for this again after it feels like just yesterday I went in for this. And I'm trying to explain to him, if you just had a recent biopsy and they've seen the results, think of it as more of a double check we are right at the finish line. This is the only real requirement that they have, and then they're going to have the decision for us. And knowing what I know about the health information that we've done through pre-qualification and what's on the application, as long as there's not anything else that's tricky that we didn't know about or write on the application, it seems pretty good that they'll come back with a good decision for us. And it took a lot more finagling than that, but he finally agreed to just go in and get the biopsy done. Well, it turns out the biopsy actually returned results that he has current prostate cancer. So he was really, really against going to get a second biopsy, but it is so, so good that he did. And so it was a postpone. So it wasn't actually a decline. But the underwriter comes back and says, hey, we get this treated. As long as it's not watchful waiting, if something is done about this, right away, we'll take them again. We'll keep
Wow.
everything as long as you update what you need to update, we'll get them back in. Well, he got a prostatectomy, had everything removed, had a follow-up, completely cancer-free, and he was in about a year later. We stayed in touch and he was in a year later. So it's just sometimes when you check on this stuff,
Yeah.
you really actually help somebody with information expediently that they might have waited, right? If he didn't want to do this in order to get this product from a process that took us hours and hours to go through, think about just the idea of, hey, do I casually want to go in for another biopsy because my results were kind of borderline first time? Could have waited. You never know what could happen, right? So by asking those good questions, you could help somebody immensely with their health somewhere down the line.
Cool stories. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, that's one of the things that keeps you here, right? When you feel like you've really helped somebody through the process. That's what keeps you around. Hey, Diane.
Just
Hey, so I have a short story that worked out really well.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Um, I have clients in California who applied for the Care Matters 2, and he got approved and she got declined for kidney failure. And she's in her early 60s. And I thought, well, she didn't tell me about this, right? And a lot of agents are like, oh, kidney failure, this is horrible. I'm not going to call, blah, blah, blah. Well, I called her and I said, Nationwide said they were declining you because of kidney failure. She said, I don't have kidney failure. She called her doctor and her doctor said, oh, I just didn't want you to worry about it. I didn't want to have to tell you that you had it. I'm just keeping an eye on it, right? And I'm like, who does that? So she thought there was a done deal. He took his policy, thankfully. And then she kept going back for more testing and more whatever they do with kidney failure and kidney function tests and all that. And then she went from a 29, and I don't know what these numbers mean, but 29 probably means you're dying. She was up to a 64 within several months, and then she was up to an 80. And again, I don't know what that stuff means, but I sent all those records back to Nationwide and I said, "Hey, this is where she is now. It looks like it was a fluke. Would she be eligible to reapply?" And they took the application and they approved her 9 months later after kidney failure.
Wow,
wow.
that's pretty crazy. Yeah, and you may not know what the numbers mean, but it's a 2.5-ish times improvement, right? So,
And 10 years ago, I probably would have just given up because I wouldn't know. But you know what? No, ask the questions, do the stuff. And she was so happy and so thankful when she got approved. So now they both
That's
have a
awesome.
policy.
until you have a, doctorate in medical science and have, really stayed at the cutting edge of medical research, you can't be sure, right?
Yeah.
So you
Yeah. And
always
then
got to ask.
and then right after she was approved, I got another lead for someone who said, I don't know if you can help me, but I have kidney issues. And I said, well, I just got someone approved. They had kidney failure. So
You are completely with the right person.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean, field underwriting and like counseling people through declines, that'll take you everywhere,
Mhm.
right? So I think like when people ask, how can I become a better field underwriter? It's like just keep working with people, keep collecting the stories. What stories you don't have right now, collect from other people,
Mm-hmm.
and you really start to learn collectively. That's why, like, I'm super grateful for my job at my old brokerage when I was working alongside 6 or 7 other long-term care specialists in desks next to me, right? You hear all the stories. When people are off the phones, you exchange stories and you learn, right? Their knowledge becomes yours. And that collective is super, super helpful in being a good field underwriter so that when you get the lead who's dealing with kidney failure, you feel like the right person for the job, right? And instead of not knowing, you can just start moving in that direction and provide some comfort to them right away that you're gonna help them find something. Yeah.
Jason, I should know the answer to this, but I do not. So I'm going to ask you,
Mhm.
do we have an underwriting checklist?
A check. We don't have a pre-qualification questionnaire ourselves that we put out. I've been recommending Linda's lately, because Linda's, even if you don't want a pre-qualification form that is this long, um, it is something where I would actually follow her lead and scale back what you don't want to include as part of the process. So I would just play
Okay.
like you're going through the questions. Don't actually submit it, please, because Linda will think you are a long-term care prospect. But take a look at those questions, and you will start to have revelations about the questions she asked, not just from the health side, but from the financial side, from the why are you doing this side to the where do you see yourself in 20 years side. There's a lot to think about there. So I think she's just created the best
Right.
aggregate of anybody I've seen. So I would follow her lead.
Awesome.
I've used One America's a lot, and
They
I've
have a good one.
shared it with other carriers. I'll literally send it to Nationwide. Hey, I got all this intel, and they're happy to look at it too. So that can also be an option.
They have a good one because number one, hybrid products, so they're underwriting morbidity and mortality. But number two, they're the carrier who probably does the most homework because they're doing, in many cases, with especially folks who are older or maybe borderline, they're doing full exams, right?
Yeah.
So they know what to look for. They're not just kind of blanket statementing. They're gonna kind of read between the lines. That's a good
I would also,
recommendation.
I'm also going to steal some of these stories with pride when I'm doing field underwriting and
Yes.
use them with folks of, hey, listen, folks, I have to know, are you on medications? And you may not initially feel comfortable telling me that, but here's the reality of it is carriers have gigantic buildings that look like casinos because they're not stupid.
Right.
They win. They know how to win and they underwrite the right things and they're going to find out anyway. In fact, I know someone who really didn't know they had kidney failure and they found out through underwriting and it helped them. So we don't know what we're going to discover. Not saying it's going to happen with you, but this is where, in the spirit of it's not your money that's going to get you coverage, that's important. It's your health.
Mm-hmm.
And your good and health is an
Right.
asset class. So we want to use your good health as an asset class to get this coverage. So
That goes for everybody on the call. Steal
Good
these with
point.
pride. And this is why we encourage to share, why people share, and why we create a platform to share because whether you're new or returning, you're gonna learn something new from somebody's story, and you're gonna meet with a client who brings up something that's tangential to a story you've heard, and that's gonna put you in the right place to put that person at ease or at least do the best job you can for them, right? Um, so amen. Yeah, steal these stories, keep them with you. Um, you know, not even the extreme ones, even just the tiny ones, right? Linda had another story where a client had in their medical records that they broke their collarbone playing football, and the client had never ever played organized football, right? That's a story that you can apply to a client scenario and say, look, medical records are sometimes inaccurate, and we need to go back and fight those with our doctor because sometimes there are things we couldn't even imagine. Doctors are using text-to-speech programs to take notes, and sometimes an aberration from the transcript taker gets into your records and it could jeopardize your ability to get coverage. Sometimes we just need to fight it, right? It's not about being upset that it happened. It's just making good on it if there's good to make. So, yeah, that's I think a great place to end it. Thank you all for sharing your stories. It's super helpful. If we know the story, we know what we can learn from it, we know how to apply it. That just makes us all better. So looking forward to many more sessions like that. But next week we have Julie from Nationwide. A couple weeks after that, we have Darcy from Manhattan Life. So she's going to talk us through OmniFlex short-term care. If there are any other sessions you want to see carrier-wise, product-wise, strategy-wise, always feel free to reach out and let me know. We're here. Thank you very much for being here. Be well, and we'll talk to you this time next week.
Bye,
Have a good
everyone.
one.